Good afternoon, everyone. We are glad you've joined us today to learn a little bit more about debt repayment. My name is Sarah Scruggs. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist here at the Credit Union, and I'm glad that you've joined us. We are going to get started today. The first thing is that we've muted everybody who's an attendee so that we can hopefully have our voices heard the most during this, but please don't let that stop you from asking questions. Using the questions feature either on the right-hand side of your screen or at the top panel. You are more than welcome to send in questions throughout. We would like to test this feature, so this helps us know that number one, you can hear us, and number two, that we can see you know how to use the questions feature. If you could let us know in the questions feature where you're joining us from today, that way we know it's working and we can see that you know how to use the questions panel. You can just put in there where you're joining us from today. Great. Awesome. I see that people are joining us from Boston, Somerville, Everett. Great. Okay. Wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. And you can continue submitting that throughout. And please know that's where you can submit your questions. If anything does come up throughout our webinar today, as well as at the end, we'll probably leave some time for additional questions. Know that this presentation is being recorded and it's going to be posted on our YouTube channel so that you can rewatch if at any point you need to leave your computer or make your lunch really quick. That is totally okay. We will send this out in an email as well if you did register for the event. So we'll send that out to you hopefully within about 48 hours so that you can look back and see if there's anything that you missed along the way. Like I said, my name is Sarah Scruggs. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist at the Harvard University Employees Credit Union. And about halfway through our presentation, Migdalia Gomez will join us. She's the Community Engagement Manager. And she right now is in the chat, sending you chats throughout, and she will take over on the second half of our presentation. HUECU, or Harvard University Employees Credit Union, is just like a bank, but we believe we do it better. We provide better value, service, a better business model, and we believe we're better for the community. As the credit union, we provide all of those products that a bank does, but we also have the opportunity to be owned by all of our members. And so every member is an owner of the credit union. Everyone who works at the credit union is also a Harvard employee. So we're in this together, and that is really something that makes us different and stand out. Everything that we do is focused on the Harvard community, including all of our teaching hospitals. So at DFCI, of course, we are committed to working with our members to making sure that we get products and services in their hands that best help them, including things like this free financial education that we're doing. So let's dive into our topic for today, which is on debt repayment and thinking through that. So we have to start where we are. There may be some of us who are at many different places with our debt repayment journey that we're on, and that's okay. We all are in a different place, but we come to this wanting to know more and wanting to learn more. So what we really want to do is focus in on where we are right now. What are our goals for the future? Why are we here at this debt repayment webinar? What goals do we want to reach by paying down on our debt? Something that I want you to really think about. I know it's not as hard hitting as all the strategies and things like that, but I want you to think about what is your goal that you have in mind when you do think about debt repayment and paying down your debt. What are those goals that you do have? One of the ways that we can find out some of our goals and maybe the best way to plan to pay down debt is by using resources that we have. This is an Aligning Priorities workbook. It is in the handout section of our GoToWebinar today. So you can download that directly. And if you'd like to be walked through how you can align your priorities for what best fits your life now and your goals for the future, this is a great handout that you can use provided by our partners at GreenPath Financial Wellness. You'll learn a little bit more about later in our presentation. But this workbook helps you to see, okay, I have this amount of money coming in every month. And so what are my priorities of how I can spend this? And what are my future goals and how will these priorities help me to reach those goals? So it really lays out this for you. Maybe you don't need this workbook and you can do that yourself. That is totally fine as well, but that workbook is here for you as a resource. So you're here. You have to think about these three things before we can really move into debt repayment strategies. First, what do you owe? If you have never sat down and written out all of the debts or loans or lines of credit that you have, you need to go ahead and do that. Listing them out for yourself may be sobering for some of us, may be a little uncomfortable. Maybe you don't want to kind of meet that head on, but that's something that we need to do to be honest with ourselves and truthful with what our situation is right now. Maybe this is easy for you. You just have a couple of different debts that you're wanting to pay on, and you already know, okay, I know exactly how much more I owe. I know exactly what I've paid. That's great. But it's time to sit down and list those things either on paper or maybe an Excel spreadsheet. So it's very important that you know exactly what you owe. What's your credit score? This is an important fact because your credit score can impact the ability that you have to possibly refinance. Or your credit score may have been impacted by some of the loans that maybe if you've missed a payment or something of that nature, your credit score could be impacted by this. If you've never looked for your credit score, I encourage you to do so. Where can you find your credit score? A couple of different places. One that I recommend is if you do have a credit card, if you have a credit card with the credit union, this does come for free. You can find your credit score on the credit card app that we have. If you don't have a credit union credit card, your credit card probably does have the availability of you to see your credit. I know mine does. I have a credit card through Capital One. They have it for free just right on the app. If you don't have a credit card at this time, you can always find a way to get your credit score either through a service or for free. You can check your credit score. So be sure that you know what your credit score is so that you're able to figure out, okay, is maybe now a good time to possibly refinance, or maybe is now a good time to think about looking through my credit report and possibly getting some of those, you know, maybe missed a payment, asking if those can be removed. So looking at your credit score will give you a better picture overall of where you stand with possibly getting additional lines of credit in the future. Now we need to calculate our cost of debt. So you may say, well, I've already listed out everything that I owe. But what we're doing when we calculate the cost of debt, we are actually going to sit down and calculate how much interest we'll pay over each life of each of our loans. This is an important practice to do because it helps put into perspective how much you're paying, not on principal or the principal amount of your loan, but just on interest. And so we're going to show you an example of how to do this. So calculating the cost of your debt. You start out, of course, with the amount on principal that you borrowed. So what amount did you borrow? We have two debts here. We have a $10,000 and a $5,000. And then we've got our interest rates that come next. You list out those interest rates so that you can see. It will help us when we think about our strategies in the coming slides. So it's really important that you list out what are those interest rates that we have on each of these debts. Then you list out your terms. So how long is the life of the loan? Terms for loans are always done in months, never in years. So you'll know exactly how many months you'll be paying. And then you want to show yourself, okay, what am I paying each month on both of these loans? So each of our monthly payments are listed here. And then we multiply the monthly payment by the terms, and that gives us the total amount of interest that will be paid over the life of the loan. So you see here that For our $10,000 loan, we're paying $4,244 in interest over the life of the loan. If we were to pay that $119 every single month for 120 months. With our second loan, we've got $5,000 at 18% for 60 months. So we're paying $127 each month, and our total interest paid over the life of the loan will be $2,618. You don't have to calculate this yourself. You can use our calculators at HUECU on our website, huecu.org/calculators. I know Migdalia is probably putting that in the chat right now. This is a great place to go so that you can calculate exactly how much interest will be paid, your monthly payments, things of that nature. So you can find our helpful calculators there. But what we really want to get down to is thinking about the total amount of our debt and how much money we're putting towards it. And this is not truly taking into account, the principal. We want to look directly at the interest, the total interest. This is the amount that we're paying just kind of as an on top of our principal. So of course the amount of our debts together is $15,000 and we're paying $246 monthly towards these loans. And the amount of interest we're paying over the life of each of these loans is $6,862. So that's on top of that $15,000 in the loan that you've actually taken out. That's quite a bit of money that we're paying in interest. And yes, these interest rates, 7.5 is a pretty middle of the road interest rate. 18 is definitely on the higher side, but we have seen that for credit cards. We have seen higher than that for credit cards. I know my own credit card has an extremely high interest rate because of the rewards that it does offer. So know that these are very realistic loans that we're piecing out here for you to see. So I encourage you, calculate this so that you can make a plan moving forward of what you'd like to do, what strategy you'd like to take on, and what would work best for you and your family. So step 2. Step 1 was all about, okay, where am I right now? What's happening? Sometimes I feel like I need one of those, not just for debt repayment, but for life, just to be more solid in, okay, this is my plan for right now. This is what's coming out of my pocketbook. This is what I'm paying each month. This is what I'm paying in principal. This is what I'm paying in interest. And now we can get to the piece of the puzzle of, okay, so what do I do now that I know that information? There are 2 methods that are extremely popular when we talk about debt repayment. One being Snowball, the other being Avalanche. Being Northerners up here in the Boston tundra, I hear we're supposed to get, an inch of snow today. So maybe we can go out and make really big snowballs. I don't think an avalanche is in our future. But we know that with a snowball, you start off small and it grows into something larger. With avalanche, it's very big all the way down the hill. Very big, very can go all the way down the mountain. So I want you to keep those things in mind as you're listening to these different strategies. So Snowball Method focuses on the smallest amount of debt first. When we looked at that previous example, we had a $10,000 debt at 7.5% interest. We had a $5,000 debt at 18% interest. So we're going to focus with Snowball Method, we're going to focus on the $5,000 debt first. That is the smallest amount of debt. Why are we doing this? Well, if you're a Snowball Method person, you like to kind of check things off a list. You like to feel the satisfaction of reaching a goal, and that drives you forward. That's what's helping drive you forward when you're thinking about reaching the ultimate goal of paying off all your debt. So little victories will help you and motivate you towards that finish line. This can also be called goal gradient theory. So Some of us just really get satisfaction out of checking things off a to-do list. I know for myself, that is my favorite thing. I'm definitely a snowball method kind of person, because for me, when I'm motivated, I'm most motivated by being able to tick off something, saying, okay, I've accomplished that, so I can accomplish the rest of the things. And that's what most helps me. What you need to do with Snowball is, of course, make minimum payments on every single debt monthly. You do not need to be making less than the minimum payment on any of your loans or debts. We don't recommend that at all. Make the minimum payments on each of your debts monthly. And let's say maybe you have an additional $20, $25 where you can make an extra payment on a loan. With Snowball Method, you would make it on the smallest amount of money. So that's the $5,000 loan. You would put an additional $20 towards that loan each month, more than the minimum payment. And then when that is paid off, you will move to the next smallest loan and start paying that off. So just like a snowball, you get from the smallest amount to the largest. And this is really for people who like those wins along the way. Now, for others who can take on the largest projects and really not feel overwhelmed, Avalanche may be for you. This focuses on the highest interest of any of your debts. So in our previous example, we had $10,000 at 7.5% interest, and we had a $5,000 at 18% interest. You would still be focusing on the $5,000 because it has the largest amount of interest. This method will probably save you money in the long run, which is why people like this method. You focus on the one with the largest interest rate, and that is what you're focusing on. So that's where you would put those extra payments. So you make the minimum payments just like on Snowball. We're never not making those minimum payments because that helps our credit score in the future. And then you make that extra $20 payment on the $5,000. So on this example, Snowball and Avalanche method are the same. That's not always the case. So I want you to remember that Avalanche is the highest interest and Snowball is the smallest amount of debt. Maybe you're a visual person and a graphic like this will help you to remember. When you're talking about a debt snowball, you focus on the smallest amount of debt first. So you see just one money bag. We're focusing on that smallest amount of debt so that we can tick off that debt from our list once we've accomplished it. And with debt avalanche, you're starting from the highest interest rate. So you're starting from the highest interest rate and paying that so that you can save a little bit of money. And like I said, with those extra payments, we want you to understand that even a little bit, like $20 a month, goes a long way. So let's say that you have that $10,000 loan at 7% interest. So your monthly payment is $200. And over the life of the loan, which is 60 months, you will have paid $1,858 in interest. That's quite a bit of money paid in interest, but not too bad. But let's say, oh, you know what? I have 25 additional dollars that I really hadn't budgeted out, but that I can put towards this $10,000 loan per month. So now my monthly payment, I'm starting to pay $225. Well, that means that I've gained 8 months of not paying this loan. That's pretty nice. And my total interest that I'm paying has gone down by about $250. So that's $250 back in my pocket just by moving my monthly payment by $25. So a little bit truly does go a long way. Well, let's say we can bump it up even more to 250, a big round number. So you're paying $250 a month on this $10,000 loan. You finish 14 months early, so you have a year and a couple of months that you're not paying on this loan. So that frees up an additional $250 a month after those 46 months. And you're able to save almost $400 in interest. So that puts $400 immediately back into your pocket. So this is a really great example of really thinking through our budgets, and if there is additional money that we can put towards debt repayment, that may help us to pay down our debt maybe a year in advance. That could be a really big thing for us as we think about increased cash flow in the future. So I really want you to think through this, and maybe there's a method that you have that you want to make sure, okay, you know what, I do have an additional $30 that I can put towards this loan. So decide if maybe that's going to be Snowball or maybe that will be Avalanche, which way you'd like to start off and pay, and start working on that. You can always switch your strategy if it's not working for you. If you try Avalanche and then you realize, you know what, I need a small win, you can start with Snowball. That's okay. You can totally do that. But what you need to remember is that even just a little bit goes a long way. I'm going to hand it over to Magdalia Gomez for the rest of our presentation.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you everyone for joining. There were a couple questions that came in, so I did put the answers in the chat, but for those that asked, the presentation will be sent to folks, and the other question that was asked was regarding refinancing, and we actually are going to talk now about refinancing. So thank you for submitting those questions, and if folks have any other questions, please feel free to use the questions panel to continue to submit those questions. So now that we have a better understanding of what is driving us to repay our debt, what is the goal, why are we going through this process, and that we understand some strategies that don't really require us to go out and take on an additional loan, to go through refinancing, just little things that we could start doing today. We could start, upping our payments. We can calculate our costs. We're going to talk now about knowing what options you have when it comes to working with different lenders. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more of the different options. So I'm going to go through all of these so that we have a better understanding of what options your loan may provide. Keep in mind that as Sarah and I give these presentations, we are speaking very generally because every lender will be a little bit different. Because we work at the credit union, we can tell you specifically what we do, but we realize that not every financial institution is a not-for-profit, so they may not be able to offer all of these options. But we want you to be aware so that when you're speaking to your financial institution or when you're comparing where to borrow a loan with or with whom to borrow a loan with, you are thinking and considering all of these possibilities. So one of the first things that we recommend is if you're in a situation that you're trying to pay off your debt and maybe you're not quite sure what the options are, but you just know that if you continue on the current path, it's going to either take much longer than what you would like, or the amount of interest paid will just be that much higher than what you had anticipated. One of the first things you can do is contact your lender, see what options they may have. When I say contact your lender, before going into full details with whomever picks up the phone, have a quick short synopsis of, hey, I have this loan and I want to talk about loan repayment options. Who should I speak with? Many times when you call whomever it is, whether it's a dentist's office, whether it is your credit card company, you're probably going to speak to one person who may then direct you to someone else. So we always recommend speaking with who could help you within that specific organization. This is another example of this being very specific to that institution. For us at the credit union, because we're not-for-profit, we offer this service. We have had many members that will call us and explain their situation, and we may be able to do adjustments. We may be able to work with that member to help them get through paying off their loan. Other financial institutions may not have that as an option. These are all things that we would recommend before considering even refinancing, which we'll talk about on the next slide. Other things to consider, ask about interest rate reduction. Due to COVID and even pre-COVID, this was an option, interest rate reduction, skip a payment, all of deferring your loans. All of these were options before COVID, but because of COVID, more individuals started utilizing. So it now seems like, oh, I didn't realize that my financial institution offered this. And the reality is most of them actually had these options available months and years in advance prior to COVID. And the reason for this is financial institutions understand that when people borrow a loan, their financial situation may change. So a lot of them have plans in place to help their community be able to pay off their debt. Some of these include interest rate reduction. There are times that if you need a temporary interest rate reduction, they may be able to offer that to help you. Why would this be helpful to them? Well, for the institution, it's helpful because they're still getting, you're able to pay on your loan, so they're getting your income. And for you, it's helpful because if that interest rate can be reduced, that means that more of your payment is going to go towards the principal. Once, of course, that interest is paid down. What happens with many of us when we're in the process of paying off our debt is that our interest may be significantly high. So you may be making a payment of $300 a month, but you realize that, you know what, my principal isn't going down, or it's barely going down. Why is that? The reason for it is that payments are going to first be applied towards the interest, and then whatever's left over will be applied towards the principal. So in the example of that $300 payment, let's say that my interest was actually $290 for that month. Only $10 of that $300 payment is going to actually help bring down my total balance on the loan. And this is why it's very important to take that step that Sarah mentioned of just running the calculation, seeing how long it will take and what amount you will actually pay in total loan interest. With the interest rate reduction, this is common very often in credit cards. You've probably have heard this, and if you have not or haven't done this, it's something we highly encourage you to do, especially during these times, especially explaining that, maybe it's as a result of COVID that there has been a change in the income in your household. But again, most financial institutions, they're accustomed to their community, their members, their customers asking for these options. But with credit card companies, let's say that your interest rate is 17%. They may be able to reduce your interest rate to 13, 10, 5%. Really will depend. Every credit card company is different. But by just reducing that interest rate, that right there is going to save you money. It's going to help you. But keep in mind that the interest rate reduction is really good. It's important, but we still need to have a plan. We need to know how much are we going to be able to pay per month. And that is another option too. You can calculate roughly how much you can pay monthly, and this is where that budgeting piece will also be vital. And contact your lender and explain to them, given my current expenses, given my income, maybe it's a reduction of income, maybe it's an increase of expenses, I am only able to pay X dollars a month. What can be done? Are there any options? What do you recommend? Putting it on the lender really opens it up because they may have another plan, options that you aren't aware of. And as with any time that we're calling any office or making any adjustments, always keep a paper trail. Make sure you know whom you spoke with, what are the next steps, and if there is a reduction of interest rate that will be offered to you, if there's going to be a new payment plan, make sure that you get that in writing, that you get that documented, you have some sort of statement or email so that if anything happens, perhaps it's reported incorrectly to a credit report bureau or whatever the case might be, you have something to go back and prove to the company, actually, no, this was an agreement that we came to on January 26th at 1 p.m. Refinancing is very popular, and when we think about debt repayment, it tends to be the first thing that people think about. It's not by accident that Sarah and I have this at the end. We realize the importance of refinancing, but we really think that before even getting to this thought of refinancing your debt, there's so much other things that could be done. And this is not to say that refinancing is a bad option or it should be your last option. It's more to say it's not the only option. Look at how many, we just spent about half an hour on the dot talking about all these other options. And there's also refinancing. Well, what exactly is refinancing? Just to make sure we're all on the same page as to what refinancing is, ultimately is taking a new loan that pays off your previous loan. So let's say that I owe $5,000 to company A at 18%. I can go to company B, apply for a loan at maybe 10% to pay off company A. So what happens is company B will write a check or wire, they'll send the money to company A, that loan has been paid off, that appears as paid off on my credit report, but now I have a loan with company B for that same amount at a lower interest rate. So a couple of different benefits of refinancing. Really, the first one that I just gave an example of is that lower interest rate. And as we know, lower interest rate means more of my money will go towards the principal faster. The other possible benefit, there are times that you may not have a significant reduced interest rate. For example, you might say, I have a $5,000 loan, but it is a 1-year loan. And maybe the monthly payments are just, you know what, it's too long, too short of a pay period. Paying $5,000 off in a month, that's more than what I can afford to do monthly. And monthly, that would be about $417. Maybe that's too much for my monthly budget. I could refinance and extend the terms. So I may say, instead of paying off the $5,000 in 1 year, what if I pay it off in 5 years? My rate might be reduced slightly, but the reason that some individuals may do this is so that your monthly payment is lower, so that your cash flow can be higher each month. There are situations that this makes sense. If you are, we see this often with students or trainees, individuals that may be relocated for work for a short time period. So maybe for 2 or 3 years, you're going through a program and your cash flow is just going to be less. Or sometimes we see this if individuals are saving for another big expense, like if they're prioritizing buying a house and they really want to accelerate saving for a down payment, they may do this. So there are times that it makes sense. I'm going to extend my loan term so that I can have higher monthly cash flow. If you're going to go with this option, still calculate what is the total cost of that loan. So again, going onto our website or finding any calculators online that you prefer to use and calculate, given the monthly payment, the term, how long this loan will be paid, and the amount borrowed, what will be the total interest paid? There are times, we've seen this many times, that extending the terms, and maybe if you reduce the interest rate even by 1 or 2%, that the total interest paid may end up being pretty equivalent to paying it off in a year. So there are times that it may make sense. And if it doesn't, if the interest paid will be higher, maybe it's $500 higher, but you decide, you know what, I'm okay paying $500 more so that I can have more flexibility on my month-to-month budget. Or something else, you could always prepay early. And that's another thing you want to find out. Are there prepayment penalties? In Massachusetts, we're very fortunate, usually do not see prepayment penalties. But other states, especially if you're borrowing a loan that's online, sometimes they have different conditions, or if you're from a different state, if maybe you're living in New Hampshire or Connecticut or Rhode Island, it could be different situations. You just want to make sure that if you go through this refinancing process and let's say you get a bonus, or maybe there is some sort of other income that comes to you, maybe it's your birthday and everyone decided to give you $50 and you have a good chunk of change. If you wanted to apply that towards your loan, you want to make sure that there's no prepayment penalty, so that if you are able to pay it off sooner, you can do so without it negatively impacting you. And the prepayment penalties, typically what that would mean is that if you pay it off early, some lenders would actually charge you for paying it off earlier. Or if your interest was supposed to be $5,000 for the life of the loan, they would still charge you that $5,000 even if you paid it earlier. Again, that is not as common in Massachusetts. It's not as common. I can't think of any credit unions that I've seen that does this, but it is still something we want you to be aware of and we want you to look for, just to make sure. Numbers help us with their example. So here is an example of what the possible benefits could be of refinancing. So in our example, we're going to take a $10,000 loan. Let's say that our monthly payment is $200 and it's a 5-year loan or 60 months. Remember, our activity is always to calculate how much is it going to cost? What is the total cost of that loan? In this example, it's going to cost us $1,858. That is that interest that is going to be paid. And I want us to start shifting our thinking. So it's not what is the interest, but how much will it cost me? Because really when you say how much will it cost you to have that loan, there's a different emotional attachment, or there's a different emotional pain that we feel like, ooh, it's going to cost me that much, versus saying total interest. Total interest just sounds like a mathematical term. It doesn't really have as much of an effect. And Sarah and I, with our presentations and with everything that we do at HBCU, we really try to put behavioral science behind it, because we want to make sure that we are using behavioral tips to help us reach our financial goals. So think of that total cost of that loan as $1,858, almost $2,000. Well, what if we refinance? If we refinance and are able to reduce that interest rate even by 2%, so it doesn't have to be substantial. You could also calculate it with one, but just to show 2%, you're going to save $11 a month. You might think, not a lot of money saving per month, but you are going to be able to save. The interest paid will be $1,300. Excuse me, the total cost of the loan would be $1,300. So you're saving about $530, $35 on that specific loan. That is if you keep the terms the same, meaning it would be a 5-year loan. But when you're trying to repay your debt, if you've already decided that you're comfortable paying $200 a month, continue paying $200 a month. When you refinance, you will be given a specific monthly payment. However, if you set up automatic payments, you can always set it up to be higher than your minimum. And that is where the avalanche snowball method comes in, because if you are going to decide which one to pay more than the minimum, this is where knowing the cost and which one makes most sense for you would be helpful. So if I'm already comfortable paying $200 a month, let me continue paying $200 a month. It'll save me a little bit more in interest. And, some of us may look at that and it's like, it's only a couple, it's barely $100. I don't know about you. I still would rather have that $100 in my bank account than have to give it to someone else. I'm pretty sure I can find something to do with almost, with $100. I'm pretty sure I could. That wouldn't be an issue. So I would rather keep that money in my pocket than give it away. And the other piece is you're done 3 months earlier. To not have to pay $200 for, to not have to be done with the loan 3 months earlier, that just gives satisfaction. It's just, peace of mind. I'm done. Celebration time. There are going to be different things to consider before refinancing. We spoke a little bit about interest rate, and that being the main reason that most individuals will refinance. And you can refinance pretty much all debt. You can refinance your credit card by doing a credit card balance transfer, or a debt consolidation loan, or a personal loan. You can refinance an auto loan. You can refinance student loans, a mortgage. So if you think of any sort of debt, you basically can always refinance, which means taking it from one lender to another. There are some situations that you can even refinance with that specific lender. So for us at the credit union, when our mortgage rates drop, those that already have a mortgage with us can actually refinance with us. So that's another great benefit. You sometimes don't even have to go to a different company. You can, depending on that lender, they could sometimes refinance their own debt. I will say it's not as common, but it is something to ask. We don't lose anything by asking. Well, when you're looking at the interest rates, you want to know what are the interest rates. Typically right now in the market that we're in, most of the rates are fixed and they're really, really low. That is why if you have a car loan and it's anything higher than 3%, look to see if you can refinance. If you have credit card debt and it's higher than anything in the teens, see if you can refinance. If you have a mortgage and it's higher than 3%, 3.5%, see if you can refinance. Student loans, if you have student loans right now, if you have federal student loans, it does not make sense to refinance right now because the federal student loans are at 0%. You're not going to get any lower than that with any private lender. So if you have a federal student loan, you want to keep those with the federal government. If you have a private student loan, you may consider looking to see what the rates are. For private student loans, those really, it does vary. Private student loans sometimes will have a significantly lower variable rate, but they could always go up. But for private student loans, I would say anything around higher than 4 or 5%, you may want to start looking. But I will say that because the federal student loans rates are at 0, and we don't know what the next couple of months are going to look like for student loans in overall, that may be one that, depending on your balance, if you are going to refinance a private student loan in the near future, you may also want to revisit in the next couple of months, because we don't know, maybe the rates will drop more for private student loans in the future. I think a lot of that will be dependent on potential changes that the Department of Ed makes to federal loans. But we won't know, unfortunately, until the next couple of months. However, with refinancing, you can refinance multiple times. If you are going to do that, if you are going to refinance multiple times, and especially if you, let's say you're going to refinance a mortgage, typically when you refinance a mortgage, they will give you the option of choosing your terms. And this is common with other debt, but it's much more common with student loans and mortgages. And typically it's because the amounts are so high that people just need more time to pay it off. So if you were to refinance, and let's say that I've been in my house for a year and it's a 30-year loan, I could refinance and take out another 30-year loan. That's great, but that means that I'm going to now be paying off my loan a year later than I had originally anticipated when I bought the loan. And again, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's something to consider. When that may have more of an impact, let's say I've been in the house for 10 years and I decide to refinance. If I had a 30-year loan and I've been living in the house for 10 years, I have 20 more years on that loan. If I refinance and I choose a 30-year option, I'm pushing it out 10 more years. There are options to take a 20-year, sometimes a 15-year, sometimes a 10-year. So just keep in mind, when you are refinancing, you don't have to go with the longest term. Keep in mind, when do you want to be done with that loan? See if you can, if you bought the house and you're trying to pay it off in 30 years, you've been in it for 10, maybe you refinance and take a 20-year term instead of extending it out an additional 10 years. Variable loans, they are not as common right now. With variable loans, it's interesting. I was gonna say they vary, but I mean, that's literally what they do. With variable loans, it will depend on how the market is. So right now, because interest rates are so low, when you look at variable loans, they're slightly lower than a lot of the fixed, but what happens is they can change. They are based off the market. So with variable loans, if you're they're a good option if you are in a situation that you can pay off the debt in the short term, meaning when that variable rate most likely will continue to be on the lower side. But let's go back to that mortgage example, or even student loans, something that will take 20, 30 years to pay off. If I am buying a house and I'm going to be living in that house for 30 years, that is my plan, I may not want to go with the variable loan at 3%, because who knows where that rate is going to be in 5 years, in 3 years, in 8 years. One of the things you could do, and with variable loans, they will have a cap as to how high it can go. But typically what we recommend for variable loans, if you're going to take a variable loan, make sure that you're comfortable and able to pay off that loan within the short term, so that if the rates increase significantly, you're able to pay it off relatively quickly. So that way you're not in a situation that the monthly payments increase to the point that you're unable to keep up with them. There are also hybrid loans, which will be variable for either variable or fixed for a couple of years, and then they switch. Typically, we see them as variable and then, fixed, and then they change to a variable rate. So the lenders will do a really good job of disclosing what kind of loan it will be, if it's fixed, variable, hybrid. There are new loan disclosures that they have to provide to you. It's called Truth in Lending, or TIL. And all this information will be there, what the cap will be, but it's very important to make sure you're comfortable. And if you're not sure, find out, ask questions. Don't ever feel like you have to be pressured into taking a loan. Benefits are going to be lost if you refinance. This is why we mentioned, if you have that federal loan for students, federal student loans, now is not the time to refinance, because you have the benefit of it being a federal loan. So the government has has dropped the interest rate to 0%, you're not required to make payments right now. If you can, that's wonderful, but you're not required to. If you take that federal loan and make it a private loan, you're going to lose those benefits, meaning you're not going to be able to have that option. And for all of you, because you are in public service, because of working at DFCI, you have the option of possibly qualifying for public service loan forgiveness. Those federal loans benefits would be lost if you go to a private loan. And then the other piece to consider, which, this is not last because it's not important, they're all equally important, credit score. At times you may decide, okay, I'm going to refinance and the rates may look really good, but if you don't have a high enough credit score, you may not qualify for that lower rate. So there are times that it may make sense for you to hold off on refinancing and instead work on increasing your credit score. Might take a couple of months, but in that time period, if you're able to increase your credit score, you may be able to jump a tier, which means instead of qualifying for maybe a 7% rate, you may qualify for a 5% rate just by increasing your credit score. And that in itself can help save you significant amount of money, as we saw in our prior examples. I'm also going to talk very briefly about debt management plan, because as much as information as Sarah and I provided, there are going to be times that our debt is just not going to be manageable given our current income. And we don't want you to feel like you don't have options. One of the options that is available, if refinancing isn't an option, if all the different debt repayment strategies don't work out, is debt management. Debt management is not debt settlement. So I want to clarify that first. Debt settlement is when usually you hear the commercials on the radio, or late at night you might hear, oh, don't pay off your debt. They'll settle for less. This person settled, they had $10,000 loan, now they only paid $5,000. That is debt settlement. This is not that. Debt settlement has a negative impact on your credit score, and that makes sense. If you owe someone $10,000 and only pay half, other lenders will see that and decide, may not want to lend to this person. They are not going to pay me back in full. It usually will also have a negative impact on your credit score, because typically to get a debt settlement, you don't pay that debt for significant amount of months, sometimes years, before the company will give you a settlement option. Debt management is none of that. Debt management is a plan that is through a not-for-profit organization. It's there are federal regulations on this process, and essentially a not-for-profit works with you to provide financial counseling, and they work with the different lenders to try to bring down the interest rate. You pay the debt management plan, they pay your debt on behalf of you, and the benefit to you is you're now paying a lower interest rate. And also, you don't have to manage your own debt. You're just sending one monthly payment, and the debt management plan is coordinating those payments with your different debtors. This is an example of our partner, GreenPath Financial Wellness. They manage our members' debt management plans. And I'm going to just quickly walk you through a couple different pieces here. With the debt management plan, they're going to give you this information before you sign up. And we always recommend, this is not a debt management plan is not for everyone. We don't recommend it for everyone. If you call and get the information, still, they're going to counsel you whether or not it makes sense for you. And if you're not sure, you can always call us and we can help you as well determine if this makes sense. But essentially what they do is they will, through reducing your interest rate, they will help so that your interest charges will be reduced. So before being on a debt management plan, it was $573 a month that was going towards interest, meaning that our principal payment is only going to $75. So that's, even though you're making this huge payment, because of over late fees and over limit charges, only $76 is actually going down towards the principal. On a debt management plan, because the rates are reduced significantly and because you're on this plan, there is a service fee. In this example, it's $50, which would be in the state of Massachusetts, $10 per account. So in this case, this individual has 5 different plans, 5 different debts that are on the plan, they're going to have $484 that is going to be applied towards the principal. For the person that's on the plan, the benefit is that you're going to have an additional $400 that's actually being applied towards the principal. And also they're going to be able to pay off the debt 40 months earlier, and save about $32,000 in interest. This sounds like a good option, and it is for some individuals, but it's not for everyone. The reason that it's not for everyone is if you're on a debt management plan, you're not going to be able to open new debt. You are on a plan, so there are certain things you have to do on your end. You have to make sure you make the monthly payments. It will have a negative impact on your credit score, usually for the first month or two while the plan is getting set up, and then slowly your credit score will recover, but it's not a quick fix. This is something that takes time, but it is an option that we wanted to make available for everyone because there are different options, and some of us may need to use this plan to help us. There's also no prepayment penalty. So if you're in a situation that you can then, maybe get a promotion or a raise at your job and want to pay it off sooner, you can. There's no prepayment penalty. GreenPath is our go-to for personal finance counseling for our members. It's free. It's available to you by attending this presentation. We are giving you access to this. You do not need to be a member of the credit union, though we would love for you to be a member. It's not required to take advantage of GreenPath. You can call GreenPath on their numbers on our website. They're open Monday through Saturday, and they're open late nights as well. And they have different availability in different languages. So if you prefer to talk to someone about your finances in a different language, GreenPath can help you with that as well. Now we went through a lot of information, so we're just going to take a couple of, maybe a minute, just to go through what our next steps are. The first one is stay motivated. We know that paying off debt can be stressful. We've been there, we get it. It's a lot, and especially with everything that's happening in this world, it can seem like, oh, am I ever going to be done with this? And the reality is, yes, you can and you will. And the thing to keep in mind is going back to our first question, what's motivating you? Where are you now? What's driving you? Keep that front and center, because there will be times that, temptation will come. Maybe you're on this debt repayment journey and there's an opportunity to go out to eat and spend $50, and you're like, oh, do I want to spend that $50 or do I want to pay it off towards my debt? And staying motivated and having that clear picture will help you with the path. Also staying informed. I hope this is just the beginning of your journey. There are many different articles on our website, on our blog. There are many podcasts, videos. There's so much information out there. Maybe listen to a couple different sources and see what resonates with you, what's going to help you stay on path. And the most important one, I hope you have pen and paper, or if you're on your computer and your laptop, what are you going to do this week? So you came to this presentation, you have some ideas, what's going to happen next? So would you take a moment, let's do this right now, there's no better time than now, and what do you plan on doing this week to help you with debt repayment? For some of you, it might be, look at what the interest rates are on your credit cards. Maybe for some of you, it's going to be calculating the total interest that you're going to be paying if you continue with your current action plan. For another of you, it may be, let me research rates. So what are you going to do this week? And what's something you could do next month? It's already hard to believe February is already happening on Tuesday. Snuck up on us. But what is something you could do next month? We gave a lot of information, and we always do put this in here. Everyone's situation is different. Sarah and I gave a lot of general information. Your specific situation will be different, but we just hope that the examples and everything we provided gives you a starting point. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit more about how you can keep in touch with us if you have questions, if you want to learn more. We also have a blog. Sarah will probably drop the link if you want to get more debt repayment information. And if there are any questions, please let us know. We're here to help you. And if there aren't any questions, one of the things I do want to point out, this is one of many webinars that we're doing for DFCI. The next one that we'll be doing will be in March for home buying. We're also doing one on cash flow, increasing your cash flow, student loan repayment, credit scores, improving your money habits. So we hope that you will see you at another presentation, and you can register for those the same place you registered for this one, which is hbcu.org/.